Welcome to Breit Guide, where we simplify Medicare. I'm your host, Megan, with Breitenfeldt Group. If you are looking for clarity and confidence when it comes to Medicare, you're in the right place. This is Breit Guide, and let's get into it. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Megan, and you are in for a treat today. We have a guest speaker, someone who has had years of experience with Medicare, lucky Alex.
Who would have thought?
Who would have thought?
Who would have thought?
Alex, biggest question, did you wake up, as a little kid, were you like, I'm going to talk about Medicare?
You know what? I actually did. That's been a
Really?
lifelong dream. No, it's not.
Like none of us have.
No,
but,
I don't think I knew what Medicare was until, shortly before my time with Breitenfeldt Group. So
yeah, so as at Breitenfeldt Group, we are heavily, Medicare is a huge topic, and so that's why we started to do this podcast. And our topic today is a very big one because it is one so many people ask, and that is, do you need to enroll into Medicare at age 65? So Alex, do I need to enroll into Medicare at age 65?
yeah, Megan, that is the question, and that's, at Breitenfeldt Group, where we start this conversation a lot of the times with people, is that very crossroad of, do you have to apply for Medicare at 65? Does everybody enroll into Medicare at 65? That's that first question. So, and there's a lot of responses, to that very question. Yes, no, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
People have read things online. They've heard things from family, friends, neighbors, coworkers, gotten something in the mail, and it all might seem to be a little bit different or contradict, one source versus another as far as like, what do you actually have to do as far as your Medicare enrollment at 65? So how we answer that at Breitenfeldt Group initially, our first answer is no. Not everybody enrolls into Medicare at 65. Some people take no action at all. They don't do anything with Medicare. When we say no, not everybody enrolls into Medicare at 65, then there's usually the question of, if I don't do something right away, if an individual doesn't take action, if they don't do a Medicare enrollment, right before 65 or the month they turn 65, that they can get in trouble in the future, or they can face these late enrollment penalties that people hear about. Or maybe there's hurdles, roadblocks to enrollment later on if they didn't do something right away at 65. I should also mention that, individuals can also be eligible for Medicare prior to turning 65.
That is correct.
So going back to the question of, does a person have to enroll into Medicare at age 65? I would say the more realistic answer there is it depends. It depends on each individual's situation. Is Medicare health insurance right for you at 65 or not?
Sure.
And that's what we're, the team here at Breitenfeldt Group is here to help people work through and plan for and help make that decision of, is, again, Medicare right for your situation or not?
And it, like you said, it can depend. I think that, people get so caught up of the worry, like, oh my gosh, it's so much, like you said, they're getting the information from their friends, they're getting the information from mailers, and, it's that panic. But also, like when we do our seminars, so Alex also speaks throughout Minnesota on Medicare, and when we do these seminars, there are many different avenues somebody can go into with their Medicare journey. So that's why it's not, simplified. Right. It's really depends on their situation.
Right.
And that's the tricky part of it,
Yeah,
because
right.
it doesn't give you that like simplified peace of mind.
Right.
But that's what we do, is we walk people through that roadmap. We call it a roadmap.
Right. And the nice aspect of working with Breitenfeldt Group is we're truly here to help you make that decision and, kind of lay out all the information so that an individual can make a decision for themselves as far as, what health insurance they're going to be looking for when they are eligible for Medicare. So if I go back to that, the initial question of, do you have to enroll into Medicare at 65? No. When we say no, a lot of times that brings up the question, like, if I don't enroll into Medicare at 65, again, how do you avoid being penalized in the future, paying more for Medicare for the rest of your life, or again, facing those roadblocks to enrollment, not being able to enroll if you didn't do something right away. So maybe I can explain that a little bit further.
Please do.
As far as, what does somebody have to have in place so that they are clear and able to enroll into Medicare anytime in the future, again, without being penalized or facing roadblocks. So it really comes down to two things. There are, two areas an individual has to have satisfied as far as, and this looks at, if somebody doesn't take Medicare health insurance 65 or beyond, what other health insurance do they have?
Right.
And then another common question is, is anything looked at before age 65? What health insurance did you have? Where did it come from? As far as being able to enroll in the future. So nothing before age 65 is looked at. It's looked at if you don't take the Medicare benefits at 65, from that point forward, what did you have for health insurance?
Correct. And so you're saying there's two things that you need to have in order to avoid any penalties in the future.
Correct.
So what would those two things be?
Yes, so what are those two areas? Number one is if somebody's not enrolled into Medicare health insurance 65 and beyond, they must maintain active group employer health insurance.
Okay.
And I would say that that full statement, has to be true. Active, right? Somebody has to be working, themselves, a spouse. Somebody has to be working, and they have to be eligible for that employer health insurance through that employee.
Okay.
So somebody has to remain working. It has to come from an employer as part of that group of employees. So that's kind of rule number one, is that active group employer health insurance. Maybe quickly, what doesn't count as an active
that's a great
employer
question.
health
So
insurance?
what doesn't count?
In Minnesota, we have the Minnesota Marketplace, MNsure. If you've heard of MNsure, it's the Minnesota Marketplace. In other areas of the United States and other states, it may be the federal marketplace, the federal exchange. But in Minnesota, we have MNsure. So MNsure is available to those that don't have that employer health insurance option. So obviously, it's not through an employer, right? Individuals are shopping. They're shopping themselves through that exchange, or families can get coverage through that exchange, which is a side note, right? Breitenfeldt Group, we do help in this area as well.
Yes.
We provide some information on MNsure and help people navigate MNsure. But MNsure is not valid once somebody is eligible for Medicare. So MNsure, you cannot keep that coverage beyond age 65.
So that is not a creditable coverage if you...
Right, yeah. It's not a valid insurance source as far as if you're already eligible for Medicare. Sure. Retiree plans are also common out there, where somebody's former employer or a former employer offers continuation of health insurance, different health insurance options for life, potentially, if somebody wants to elect that coverage through an employer. But it's a retiree plan, right? It goes back to that you got to maintain active employer health insurance. So obviously, a retiree plan is no longer active. So somebody with a retiree option may have to have other parts of Medicare to go along with that retiree coverage.
And so what is this second? You
Yeah.
said there's two things.
So that was area number one, where if somebody did not elect Medicare health insurance at the month they turn 65 and beyond, they must maintain that active group employer health insurance. The second area and last area somebody would have to have satisfied to avoid these penalties you hear about, or getting in trouble, or again those roadblocks to enrollment in the future, would be something called creditable prescription drug coverage, or Medicare creditable prescription drug coverage. And that just means if you don't take Medicare prescription drug coverage at 65, which you're able to, but you don't have to, right? Nobody is making you enroll in that Medicare drug coverage. You don't have to take that coverage if it's not right for your situation. But then how can you get it later on? And how can you avoid, again, paying a penalty or paying extra for it if you do go on that coverage later on? So if somebody finds themselves, if they're wanting that Medicare drug coverage in the future and they didn't take it at 65, they would have to maintain other health insurance or other insurance for prescription drug coverage in particular that meets Medicare standards for drug coverage or exceeds Medicare standards for drug coverage.
So when you talk about the word creditable, it basically has to meet or exceed the standards of Medicare.
Correct.
So if you have those two things in place, and then I know when it comes to creditable drug coverage, there's a couple other sidebars to that.
Yes, as far as like where can you obtain that?
Yes.
Where do you obtain that coverage? How do you know if you have it or don't have it? Because if you don't have a prescription drug plan through Medicare, which we'll talk in future episodes, right? How do you know if you have this creditable status satisfied, that you won't get in trouble in the future per se and pay these penalties, right, for this category? I would say the most common way to have this Medicare creditable drug coverage, if you don't have it through one of the additional plans, which we're going to talk about in future episodes, right? But if you don't have a prescription drug plan through Medicare, the most common way would be through an employer, right? Those that are going to maintain that active employer health insurance and have that insurance as part of that employer group, that employer health insurance plans can be Medicare creditable.
Sure. Okay.
They can meet that. Standard set every individual year, which it does change annually. Now, is every employer plan creditable?
That's what I was going to ask. Like, how do you know? Like, if people like, do employers send a letter? Do they, is that a conversation with someone?
Yeah, that is a great thing to know and a great thing to talk about, is because how do you know? How do you check this? How do you find this out? And not every employer plan is creditable. Not every employer plan meets that standard set by Medicare every year for prescription drug coverage. So we always tell people, for peace of mind, as you're planning for your Medicare eligibility, if you're going to take Medicare or not, or what would future enrollments look like, to find that out from your employer, or better yet, find out, call the insurance company under which you have that employer health plan.
Sure.
Call the number on the back of the health insurance card and just ask that question. Is the coverage I have now through my employer creditable according to Medicare? Does it meet Medicare standards for prescription drug coverage? And it's yes or no. You can get it in writing, right? Anytime your benefits change under your employer, right? You go through open enrollment.
Yeah.
You want to find out again, the new plan that you're enrolling into, if you're beyond 65, is that creditable according to Medicare? Does it meet Medicare standards or not? So I would say that's one of the common ways to have this Medicare creditable drug coverage. This, area 2, box number 2, so to speak, in addition to the active employer health insurance, to have this satisfied is through an employer. Now, there's some other ways as well, like the VA. If you're a veteran, if you're eligible for VA prescription drug coverage, that's also considered a creditable source.
Yeah.
CHAMP, right? There's CHAMP benefits and TRICARE benefits available to veterans and government employees, family members. So if you are eligible for one of those programs, those are considered creditable sources.
Sure. So that's kind of a little sidebar to what most people will experience with their creditable is going to be through an active health insurance.
Yes, I would say that's probably one of the more common ways to have that category satisfied of Medicare creditable drug coverage would be through active employment.
Sure.
Through active employment. Now, I guess, former employer coverage, of course, could also be creditable if somebody's, say, on COBRA or has one of those group retiree plans, things like that.
Okay.
All right. So, Megan, if we circle back to the original question that we started today's topic on is, does an individual have to enroll into Medicare at age 65? Again, we start by saying no, not necessarily. Every situation is different, so really it depends. And again, those two areas somebody has to have satisfied, or they should have satisfied if they're wanting to avoid those future penalties or those roadblocks to enrollment, would again be the two areas of active employer health insurance and creditable prescription drug coverage. Now, last thing I'll say on that is, every employer plan is different. Every situation is different. So this is a general rule and a general concept. So for further information on it, for individual advising on this, we always, encourage people to contact us to have that one-to-one conversation, to really go through all the ins and outs of your employer health plan, so there aren't any surprises in the future.
Yeah, and I think that's the trickiest thing, because ideally we want, when we talk about we're going to simplify Medicare, ideally we want to simplify it. We want to know, what is it yes? Is it no? What does that look like? And that's the thing. It can depend. And that's, heavily in our value at Breitenfeldt Group is meeting and looking at what you have. And every situation is so different. And so, to hear from someone that you've had coffee with, or to hear something from, the mailer or news, whatever that looks like, every situation is so different. And I think, like, we stress that so much when we speak about Medicare is, make sure your resources, that you have trusted people who are really knowledgeable in the source of Medicare, because it is ever changing.
Yes.
Which is always fun.
Right, right.
Like I said,
Keeps
none
it
of us
interesting.
dreamed as little kids that we'd be like, oh, let's get into Medicare, because
Right.
it is ever changing. And every situation is so different. And so, when someone sits down and looks for help, and someone, calls Breitenfeldt Group and they're like, okay, how do we go about this, or what's our next steps here?
Yeah, it's like, so what are Breitenfeldt Group services? What are our services when we're talking about this topic of, looking to plan or prepare for starting Medicare or not when somebody is eligible? So if an individual is thinking that they'll have that active employer health insurance option beyond age 65, again, through their employment or another person's employment, what are our services in this situation? And it often comes down to a simple comparison, right? So I bet we have these conversations every single day with people taking a look at, okay, what are the cost and benefits of your employer health insurance? And we're going to want to look at, the number of employees eligible for that health insurance and some other factors as well. But what are the costs and benefits of your employer plan, right? And then what are the costs and benefits of Medicare? And we'll lay that out, and then people are able to see, what's going to fit their situation.
Right.
Remaining with that employer health insurance plan as long as somebody is working. Or maybe it's transitioning to Medicare, again, because of the cost and the benefits, usually on a monthly basis. So that can, play out in a variety of ways. Sometimes individuals remain working, but they go on Medicare. Or they remain working and they stay on their employer health insurance. So it doesn't matter to Breitenfeldt Group, right? If people are starting Medicare at 65, or 2 years later at 67, or at 75, whenever the time is right.
We had someone just a couple years ago start in her 90s.
Right, that's
for
right.
the first time on Medicare, which was really, that's an extreme. So good news, you can work until you're 90 without having to go on Medicare.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, I think that's the biggest goal, or one of the biggest goals that we have, is just for someone to know what they have and why.
Right.
And so whether that's, I'm going to stay on my employer coverage, this is why. I'm going to continue to work, go on Medicare, this is why.
Right.
I know I need to go on Medicare because this is why. And I think that's our goal, is so when you're having coffee with someone, when you're talking with a friend, and the topic, because let's be real, like, we're all you get to different stages in your life, and pretty soon Medicare becomes that heavy topic.
Right.
And you're sitting there, but you know what you have and why. And so and that can change from year to year. It can change not even year to year, depending on your situation.
Right.
And so we do value ourselves in saying that we are an advocate for you and with you every step of that journey.
Right.
Because it can be ever changing.
Right. Yeah, no, I think education is key. And the more people know about a subject, or the more people know about what they're planning for, everybody's happy in that situation. And that's what we look for, is just, like you said, that peace of mind and that planning and preparation.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Alex. So kind of to wrap this segment up on this Medicare piece of it, last question I have for you is what does this enrollment look like, when enrolling into Medicare?
Yeah, what does enrolling into Medicare look like? We've had that conversation with someone, and we've looked at all the different angles to this and their choices that they have in front of them as far as health insurance at 65 and beyond. So if we look at enrollment a little bit, and first, if we talk about enrolling into Medicare, when everybody is newly eligible or can start for the first time, would be the month somebody turns 65. So it doesn't matter if their birth date is the 15th of the month or the 28th of the month. Your Medicare health insurance would start the first of the month you turn 65. And it will start the first of the month you turn 65. as long as you would enroll into it the 3 months leading up to your birth month. So individuals have 3 full months to enroll into Medicare, and it will start the first of the month they turn 65.
Okay.
So if we give the example today on a December birthday, right? A December birthday, they would get September, October, and November to do their Medicare enrollment for December 1st. Now, anytime in those 3 months they do their Medicare enrollment, it'll start the first of the month they turn 65.
Okay.
Fun trivia fact, though, right? So if you're
Dun,
with
dun,
friends,
dun.
if you're with family, at dinner, here's a great question to ask people. What if you're born on the first of the month? Somebody's born on the first of the month.
I'm not.
Oh,
Are
you're.
you? No, you're
I'm not either.
No, but if someone is.
But if somebody
on the
is,
first of the month,
if you have a first of the month
you're
birthday,
extra special.
yes, right. If you're born on the first of the month, you can actually start your Medicare coverage the month before you're 65.
Okay.
So a December 1st birthday only, December 1st birthdays could begin their Medicare coverage November 1st.
Okay.
And they could also enroll a month ahead as well. They could enroll in August for November. So there's that
it's
fun
a wild
fact.
little fun fact.
Yeah. But otherwise, the second of the month or any other day can only start the month they're actually 65. Sure. So there's kind of that 3-month rule before your 65th birth month. Individuals can also enroll the month they turn 65.
Okay.
It'll start the first of the following month. We usually talk about this to be strategic or help people plan. Because let's say somebody's going to have a big year, right? They're going to turn 65 1 month, and they're also going to retire that same month. They're going to leave or lose employer health insurance. Well, they could do all of their Medicare enrollments in 1 month. In that month, they turn 65, and it'll start the first of the following.
Sure. Okay.
So let's say a December birthday is turning 65 in December, but also retiring, and will have employer health insurance through the rest of that month. They could do their Medicare enrollments in December to start January 1. And then they're not paying double premiums for coverage that they may not use.
Sure, that makes sense. And, I know too, because it's called your initial enrollment period, correct? When you are...
The
so the
IEP. We get into some fun acronyms.
Really cool.
Right.
And so it also then, like you said, it can be the month of and then 3 months after. Correct.
Yeah, so then, like you just mentioned, you also have the 3 months after you turn 65 to do your Medicare enrollment at that first time. It doesn't matter if you've had employer health insurance or not. That's your first window to enroll into Medicare with that, first eligibility. It doesn't hinge upon any other factors. You can do your enrollment at that time. And if somebody finds themselves enrolling into Medicare the 3 months after 65, again, coverage starts the first of the following month.
Sure.
So again, sometimes we use that as a strategy to help people enroll based on when other health insurance is going to be ending.
Sure.
Yeah, so that's that first enrollment into Medicare around somebody's 65th birth month, that 7-month window. 3 months before 65, the month you turn 65, and then 3 months after.
Okay. Ooh. That's
right?
a lot. Yeah. That's a lot. Yeah. But it's good. It's good information. And like I said, if nothing else, we're here to walk you through those steps, depending on your situation. Right. And
so I don't know if the next question then is, if you're enrolling if you don't enroll at 65, right, how do you start Medicare then beyond age 65?
Right.
Right? Which then it goes back to what we talked about at the beginning of this episode, right? So if somebody did not enroll into Medicare around that 7-month window when they turn 65, how do they begin Medicare then thereafter? Now it's a year later, they're 66, or 2 years later, they're 67. And now they're going to be, leaving or losing employer health insurance. How do you go on Medicare? Well, again, it goes back to what we talked about at the beginning, right? There's those 2 areas of active employer health insurance where somebody needs to maintain continuous. There cannot be a gap in coverage, right? Continuous active employer health insurance from the month they turn 65 until whenever they're wanting or needing Medicare in the future.
Okay.
So at that point, again, somebody can begin enrolling into Medicare, and it actually follows that same 3-month time frame, where after 65, you can begin enrolling into Medicare 3 months before your employment ends.
Okay.
And really, we'll probably get into more parts and pieces of Medicare in the future.
I know, it's hard to stop because we're just like on a roll.
Yeah.
And you're probably there taking all your notes and stuff like that.
But just to kind of foreshadow, or maybe like, highlight maybe what's ahead, is applying for Medicare after 65. Again, it all hinges upon having that active employer health insurance.
Yep.
And it's to get into Medicare Part B. So to get Medicare Part B in the future, which is the medical piece, you have to have that proof of employer health insurance. A common question too is, okay, if I'm going to have that employer health insurance after 65, when do I provide that proof, or when do I provide that documentation? Yeah. So the proof always comes later on at the time of enrollment. So if somebody's turning 65 and, they've done the comparison with Breitenfeldt Group as far as the cost and the benefits, and we go over the other factors so that person has the peace of mind and education of, and the confidence of keeping that employer health insurance, there's nothing to prove at that time, right? There's no documentation to say, hey, I'm working past 65. The proof comes, again, in the future at the time of enrollment. So at age 67, at age 68, that's when you provide the proof of that employer health insurance after 65.
Okay. So, anything else to add? That was good. That was good for this episode.
Right.
I think that gives, like I said, this can't be overly simplified of a topic. There's some topics that we can be very simplified, and it is what it is. This is it depends kind of situation, and so
we try to make this intricate program and complex program as simple as possible, but there are a lot of facets to consider. And
okay, I appreciate the insight, and on every episode that we do here at Bright Guide Podcast, we talk about all things Medicare, but then we kind of go off the rails on a non-Medicare topic, because we're like, you know what? Medicare is great. Obviously, it's why you're here, why you're listening to us. But, what's like a real life thing that we can talk about? And Alex and I, when we were like, what are we going to talk about on this episode today? We were having a conversation, because we do work on the same team. And we were having this conversation because I just recently moved, and pretty much repainted our whole house. And so I was asking Alex, like, does your paint matter? Does the paint that you use matter? Because I feel like I spent $75 on a gallon of paint, and I've spent $35 on a gallon of paint. And for me, I don't know if it matters. I still feel like I'm doing 2 coats. So do you feel like it matters?
Does the paint you use when you're painting your home matter?
I know.
And I have done a fair amount of painting as well, although at this point in time I don't look forward to it. I procrastinate at this point. I do not want to do any more painting.
I feel like your wife is probably like saying, we should paint maybe, and then...
Yeah, I hope not. I hope she doesn't say that. Especially after going home after this podcast. Say, let's do some painting. But I would agree that my experience, redoing different home projects in different rooms, and I would also agree that I haven't found the biggest difference in paints. There's not been a moment where it's been night and day of, oh my gosh, one coat, now I'm done. It's been so simple. No drips, no runs. Yep. Oh my goodness, this is just
a miracle.
It's a miracle paint.
Yes.
So whether you're on the lower end of the budget of paint or the higher end, I just really haven't found a difference, and maybe right in the middle is the way to go.
We're going to ask any of you painters out there, does your paint matter? And what's your favorite kind of paint? You can comment in the comments section. And, as I was we were discussing this, I thought, okay, so if I invest in good paint, do your brushes and rollers matter? You have a very big price point between brushes and rollers. Am I not feeling my paint matters because my brushes aren't? I bet
there'd be some strong opinions and arguments on the brushes and rollers as well.
To help not only myself out, because I have still plenty of painting to do,
but if I ever do get roped into more painting projects, I'd like to hear
other listeners. What is your favorite paint? Does it matter? And do your brushes matter and your rollers?
Yeah, let us know.
I'll
take notes on that.
Yeah. So that way, when Alex's wife, needs a painting project, he can resort to this episode.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Megan,
yes,
for
joining us today. We'll definitely hear from you again.
I'll be back.
Medicare guru.
Right.
Member here at Breitenfeldt Group, and as always, we thank you for joining us. We look forward to talking all things Medicare in future episodes. We have some more episodes coming on, Part A, Part B, D, Part D drugs, like all the things. So stay tuned, subscribe, follow us so you don't miss an episode, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. And remember, you're not navigating Medicare alone. At Breitenfeldt Group, our entire team is here to support you, answer your questions, and help you feel confident in every Medicare decision you make. If you found today's episode helpful, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss an episode of Breit Guide. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.